to have people come and tell me why my art is so important in their life. That in my soul is the happiest comments anybody has ever made for me in my art.
Welcome back to the Missoula podcast, in studio with my guy, Brandon Smith. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Good to be back.
Good to be back. Well, excited to have our guest on today, Larry Pirnie. Welcome to the Missoula podcast.
Thank you.
Larry, maybe you can, maybe an obvious question, or maybe a non-obvious question. What are you most known for? What is the piece of work that you've done that is probably the thing that you're most known for?
You know, there isn't any one piece. After 50 years of doing this, so many people now are looking me up because they've had my painting for so many years. And the thing they will compliment me on most, which really has surprised me, is not my subject. It's my color. And that's true with patients at St. Pat's who say, Larry, I started every day looking at your painting because it made me happy. And that's what I'm hearing from so many of my collectors, is that my colors bring life to them that they can't get any other way. It's kind of like music. Certain music hits us, that nothing else could touch those same chords. I never even thought about that. But now I brought in a title of a book that I'm just starting to read that is Art in the Brain. And they're starting to realize how much we need to have the arts around us for the kind of things people have been telling me about my color. Not about my subject. Maybe the subject kind of got them interested in the painting, but the color is what they've lived with and continually comment to me about how important it is. Then I'm going to add something as long as we're on the subject. One of my favorite projects was with the Carousel. They asked me to do a horse. And I told them, I said, well, this isn't going to be any standard horse. They said, no, we want you to do your thing. So I adopted a horse. Today, when I go over there, the ticket takers tell me kids will give up a turn just so they can ride paint.
Wow.
The reason is the color. There is nothing more colorful than that. I love all of the horses there. I mean, I'm a real Carousel fan, but they said that the kids fall in love with that color immediately. So there is a whole other intelligence now. And I think as a society, it's time because of these devices, everybody is visual now. It is not just a printed word anymore. And in fact, in school, my grandkids tell me that most of the kids can't even print anymore. I mean, can't write.
Oh, cursive.
Yeah, they can only do print.
Yeah.
So, we are becoming a much more visual society.
Yeah.
So,
Larry, where are you originally from? Where were you born and raised?
Well, let's see. I was born in Waterloo, Iowa. My dad was a farmer. Married a gal from Waterloo, Iowa, and then we had to move to North Dakota, or actually South Dakota, Aberdeen, South Dakota. And his brothers were there too, farmers, ranchers. And then we moved back to Iowa. My dad found after the Depression, he couldn't stay in farming anymore. And so then he didn't know what kind of a career. So we moved to Bettendorf, Iowa, because he wanted to be a carpenter. And he had an opportunity to help build a big building down there. And that was his beginning. He ended up being a traveling salesman and working for Kentel Flooring Company and working with all the distributors of Kentel Flooring. But my dad, the gift I got from my dad during that time is he encouraged me and my brother in the arts, because my grandpa, my mom's dad, he absolutely loved. And that was the first artist in the family. And they lived up in Waterloo. They eventually moved down to San Diego. And we used to see him every year going from Iowa down to San Diego. And that's when I fell in love with the mountains. That's when I started seeing Western art. And that was the beginning.
What do you think it was about art that grabbed you? And why do you think your dad wanted that in your life?
I don't know why my dad, and I think it's because my dad had so much respect for his father-in-law. So many of my male friends in the arts, and my brother found that out. My brother went into acting in his career, that the men that we dealt with, most of them had to fight their fathers all the time. You can't make a living in the arts.
Yeah.
You can't boom, 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 boom.
Right.
And it was a constant fight. My brother and I never had that. What my dad used to say to us when we were kind of holding back our art and all that stuff is, boys, nothing happens unless you show up. And that's what guided both of us through our career. When we were kind of tough on ourselves, kind of saying, well, I'm not ready, boom. Well, if you don't show up, you have no idea. You have just no idea. And so anyway, my dad, it's hard to say. My dad had his greatest gift, I think, was his gift of gab. And that's why he eventually became a traveling salesman, because people saw that in him and they hired him. And he made us take speech classes in high school. It's kind of interesting because I went into marketing for 10 years before I ever lived my dream. And I could speak in front of groups very comfortably and present ideas and stuff. And my brother became an actor because we took those speech classes.
Larry, as a kid growing up on the farms in Iowa and the Dakotas, what did you hope your life would look like? Did you have a dream outside of farming? Did you think you were just going to grow up and run your own farm? What?
Not at a young age. I didn't. I liked the way I was living. There was nothing I thought, gee, I ought to do this. I want to do that. No, as a real young person, I liked my life. I mean, there was nothing that made me think, oh, I don't want to be part of this anymore, or none of that.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, though my mom had a picture that I drew when I was 4 years old of a cowboy and horse. And do you know who that hero was that I drew? The Lone Ranger in silver. And the reason being is the Lone Ranger was the first hero cowboy that went on radio. No television in those days. And that voice of his was definitely the voice of a hero, deep, resonant kind of a voice. And that made me really pay attention in the radio to what was going on. And then the comic book came out. And that was the beginning of the imagery. And then I've always loved people's stories. I don't care, when I meet strangers on planes and stuff like that, I try to pull their story up because that stays with me. I get images in my mind if they'll share with me some of their chats, kind of like what we're doing right now. I remember a lot of people's stories. Don't ask me their name and don't ask me the date that we did it. But the content of the story, I finally had and I'm rambling here, so
you're great. Keep going.
I never got credit for my stupidity until I got to Pratt Institute, where I went to art school in Brooklyn, New York. And I had to take art history. And it was one of the few art schools in those days, good art schools, that offered a degree. So you had to take academics. Most of the good art schools just offered a certificate.
Okay.
And so that's why I was taking art history. And this teacher pulled me in, I'd say about halfway through the classes that I took. He said, Larry, it's very unique. He said, in class, you participate more than any of my students, and probably more than almost any student I've ever had. Your idea of concept, what you vision when I tell you a story about any aspect of art history, you come back with more information than I ever gave you, because you've got an ability to conceptualize that's phenomenal at such a young age. And he said, but you flunked my tests. Because his tests were always name and dates. And they just don't register with me. They're not that important. I tie the whole thing that I've read about mankind and the development of us as a species, I put that all together in my being. It's not just this one little story that stays with me.
So it sounds like school was probably rather hard for you growing up.
Except what I did is I went out for football and basketball in high school, became a star, was in the papers all the time,
Gotcha.
Got my ego fed. But what was more important in terms of affecting my art is I participated in a lot of community projects where they needed a picture of something, and I would draw that. And my buddies wanted me to draw a picture of this plane, or I was very much involved with community, even as a young person, and I liked it. It was my way of getting attention and a way of participating more than anything else I was doing. And that's carried over even today here, is this community. When I decided, and then I'm going around here, guys, but the reason I became an artist when I did, because I kept putting it off, and I was in advertising for 13 years, doing a lot of different kinds of visual responsibilities. My little daughter died, my little 4-year-old, unexpectedly. tied on the operating table. And that was my message. Okay, boy, time. You're going to be an artist. You don't know how long you're going to live. You want to get to it? I gave my company a 2-year notice because I wasn't leaving because I was mad at them. I just said, no, it's time to live that dream. Well, being in marketing, I knew that if I was only interested in money, I was going to go to Denver to do Western art. That in those days, that was the best Western art market. I said, no, I want a smaller community. Well, a buddy of mine knew that I loved Montana, and he was a salesman for the company I worked for in Montana. He said, Larry, I'll lend you one of my pickups. Why don't you just drive all around Montana and pick a spot in Montana you want to live? It was a great gift. Then I found out that my secretary just got married, and her brother-in-law had a cafe up in Big Fork on the flat. She said, that's where you want to live, Larry. I said, okay, well, I'll check it out because I was going to be in Billings because that's where my buddy lived. So I thought, they got mountains and everything there too, But when I got here to the western side, it was just so special in so many ways, just in terms of the landscape. That the artist in me got really intrigued immediately.
Yeah. Larry, when those early formative years, or maybe even high school, when did you realize that you had something special with art?
Really early. Like my mom, I told you my mom had that drawing that she kept for years. I don't have the drawing because when she died, somebody in the family took that drawing, and I have no idea where it went.
Probably on eBay somewhere right now.
Who knows? But I knew the only heroes I had as a young boy were artists. That's when Norman Rockwell came into my life.
Sure.
There was just a thing that I just loved. Again, it was visual. I helped my dad when he became a carpenter, just because it was visual again. I was putting things together, So I knew at a very young age. I wouldn't have told you. Probably I would have told you in those days, I want to be a cartoonist. Because most of the drawings I saw in those days were either magazine covers or comic strips.
Do you have, or did you have a mentor who helped you figure out the ins and outs of a career as an artist? Not just how to paint, but how to make this a business?
Well, that's a good question because it's not as simple as I'm going to try to tell you. Yes, if you'd asked me early in my life, I'd have said, yeah, my high school art teacher was wonderful because he exposed me to a lot of art other than Western art, and was just a wonderful, wonderful guy. Was a fun guy, charge of the yearbook, and so I did a lot of my art for the yearbook and all of that stuff too. He was very supportive, wonderful human being. Once I got into Montana and started painting after 6 years, I almost quit because I was bored out of my mind. Because I was trying to be a Western artist, not Larry Pirnie. And I did an exercise that I learned in corporate. If you are not happy with your career, but there is a job you'd love to have, start writing it down and tell yourself, what is it? Why do you want? What is in that job you like? And list it. The things that you think that job would offer you. Then if there's a few people in it that you know are doing what you want, write their names down. After you get that list put together, give me 4 or 5 words that sum up what all that means. I did that exercise because when I lived in New York, I went to Europe and saw all the great art of the world, museums. I could go to Europe cheaper than visiting my parents who moved to Colorado. And because they had special student rates and stuff like that. But for me, when I, with how I'm going to put this, when I decided that art was going to be it and Western art was going to be it, I wanted to be part of a community, just like I was as a kid. In terms of my past, in terms of how did I start to identify with myself? It was not to be a superhero. I never even thought about art that way because I'd seen so much art in my life that, in so many different kinds. And I was in art school when they just started abstract and they were bringing color. Norman Rockwell I had a chance to meet, and he changed my life. That's the reason I ended up going from Iowa to Brooklyn to go to college. He told me, he said, Larry, most of the young people that come see me who have wonderful art talent will never be artists because they can't make their art a product. You have to be able to work with galleries and other outlets for your art if you're going to make a living at it. And so many people have that, but they have schools still today don't teach marketing because the teachers chose to teach, not get into the market.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. And so it's still true today. I've spoken to a few schools, and the ignorance is just unbelievable.
So you mentioned you had the opportunity to meet and were friends with Norman Rockwell.
Yes.
How did that come to be? What was that first experience like?
Again, the story goes on and on. My senior year, I would have played at the University of Iowa football. My dad was a football hero, and we had great influence on me. So, but I was also a good basketball player. But I blew out my knee on my senior year football, and was not recovering fast because those days they didn't have what they have today. And anyway, one of the schools, McMurray College in Jacksonville, Illinois, offered me a basketball scholarship. They took a chance on me. And so I went down to McMurray College, which was only maybe 100 miles from me, because I was right on the Mississippi River in Iowa, and they were right across the river about 50 miles or so. Anyway, my roommate was from Massachusetts, and he saw me drawing all the time. My knee was not recovering very well yet. And so it looked like I wasn't going to be able to keep my scholarship. And he said to me, Larry, come home on spring break. Norman Rockwell only lives about 10 minutes from me. Write him a letter, and I'll bet you he'd be glad to talk to you. I said, he's not going to talk to me. He bugged me for almost 2 months. And the only reason I wrote the letter was he said, Larry, I'm not having you come home on spring break with me. You're not interested in talking to Rockwell? I want nothing to do with you. I go, all right, the letter. And the letter that I got back is in my gallery within like 10 days. And it was a wonderful letter. He said, basically, I paint in the morning. I want to be free, but I'm free in the afternoon. So when you get to town, call me and we'll set up an appointment. That's exactly what I did. And the counsel he gave me, I give to all the kids that come to me today. It's still very sound. But he told me, he said, if you get accepted to Pratt Institute, that's the only school he really recommended because it offered a degree. Most of the art schools and those real good art schools didn't offer a degree. And he said, Larry, your chances of being a professional are very slim. So you'll have your undergraduate out of the way and you can get your master's in some other direction. And that's why I tell all young people exactly the same thing. But he told me something else. He said, if you get accepted and you go to school in New York, you don't even have to go to class. If you just go to all those museums and galleries, you'll get an art education, because that's when Paris was not number one now. It was New York, because the marketers had moved into New York. And he said, you're going to hate so much of the art you look at because it's all now real contemporary. And you're going to find some that you really love. If you stay an artist, they will both influence the art you do. And he's absolutely right. That's how I really discovered color, because of the abstract period. The play with color these guys and gals did was just blew my mind. It's the kind of thing that I'm hearing now from people who love my color.
Right.
It really had impact on me that I had never planned on.
I mean, so many questions for you. Looking back, the Renaissance period, abstract came into play. Do you have a favorite artist? I mean, is there one that?
I really don't, except, like I would have told you, one of the comic book heroes was Fred Harmon, who had a ranch in Colorado. But the reason he was my hero is that he showed pictures of himself working in the studio on the inside of his comic books. It's the only artist that ever did that.
Larry, was there a particular piece you did that changed the trajectory of your career? Like, when did Larry Pirnie become Larry Pirnie?
I almost quit after 6 years. And that's when I was telling you a little bit earlier about the exercise I did and the words I came up with, bold and colorful. Guess what my work wasn't? And so that's what we bounce on all over the place. But you asked me about teachers and stuff. Well, now I would tell you the teacher that had the most impact on me was in third grade, not the one I told you about that encouraged me and told me about the history of art and all the things. Okay. You know why? Because that teacher made me draw with sticks, feathers. I couldn't draw with my crayons. They took me away from the element that I had drawn, and I experienced all kinds of things that I just had no idea what was going on. But the kid in me loved it, and that's when the kid came into my art instead of this, because I had all that formal art education in art. This was packed with stuff. The kid didn't get much chance. And that's when I got the squeeze bottles. People always ask me, why do you do squeeze bottle cutouts? A lot of people don't. Right now, my gallery has some wonderful old cutouts, but nobody up here really wants them. But if I put them back in California, they'll be gone in an instant because of the art market. They're a whole different kind of art market. But that's all because of that third grade teacher. Then that kid in me didn't ever forget it until I was willing to say, okay, bold and colorful. Well, the last time I remember really playing bold and colorful was when I was in third grade with Mrs. Shipley.
So what was it like, that moment where you had that piece, the first one that you sold, somebody took your painting, gave you money. What was that feeling like of somebody's buying my artwork?
You know, it never really, because I was in advertising and I was around the arts a lot, that didn't have much impact on me. As I ended up, when I moved to Montana, about 2 months after I moved here, I met this wonderful woman who was up watching her son's football game. And then the parents went in to have a drink before they drove back to Missoula. And we decided, let's have a drink, because I was at the bar when they stopped in that bar. And then we danced. And then we started our relationship. And she will tell you, if she was alive, she died now, and I live alone. She said, well, I fell in love and ended up marrying this guy who said he was in marketing, he was an artist, but he couldn't sell his own work. So he said, somebody had to. So I decided, okay. Now, she was Miss Personality. She loved people. And to this day, I get cards and letters from people she maintained relationships with. And she put me in galleries all over the West. She was in that car driving miles upon miles, but she was, again, a North Dakota lady, farm gal. She knew what work was, and just a wonderful, wonderful person. When she died now, which is almost 5 years ago, I've never been the same. I've never been as productive as I was. I always thought it was we. Pirnie Art was we, because if I hadn't been in marketing and understood what it takes to be successful if you're an artist, it isn't just me doing art. There's got to be a good salesperson. Galleries sometimes are the right persons, but a lot of times they're not. And I was very fortunate to have this person say, well, that gallery isn't doing the job. She just took the art out and put in another gallery. And so, again, to answer your question, I don't remember any one particular sale that made that much difference to me. What has made a lot more difference to me is now, after working for 50 years in the business, to have people come and tell me why my art is so important in their life. That in my soul is the happiest comments anybody has ever made for me in my art. And when I tell you that originally working in community was an important part of my experience, well, there's a good example why. It's my neighbors. It's people here, a few people from out of town and stuff. Because Lynn, my gallery owner, sells to a lot of people, even outside of this country, people who see the art. The horse is universal as a symbol. It's amazing how many countries really, the horse is really an important symbol to them.
I want to come back to the horse, but let's go to our rapid fire questions here about Missoula, and we'll come back to.
Well, just don't ask me names and dates, because I won't be able to have them.
All righty, sounds good.
All right, Larry, what was your first initial memory of Missoula, Montana?
The first time I came here was on that trip I was telling you, where Buddy gave me the pickup truck, and I came down here, and there was a bunch of kids at the Dairy Queen, and they all had costumes on, and they said they were going to go to a birthday party of some kind, but those costumes were just really gorgeous, and that's an image again that's been in my head forever. Missoula at that time was not very impressive, but the Flathead Lake and these mountains, the Mission Mountains, to this day, I take circle trips and I spend a lot of time up in the mountains, in the hills. I used to do a lot of hiking, but I've fallen enough times now at this age where I can't do the hiking I used to do. But visually, I'm never bored with those mountains. They just always put on a show. And I find over the years, because of these circle trips I take, that the east side of those mountains and the west side have total different personalities. And so for me, my first connection here was visual. Because I could have gone to just mountains, I could have stayed in Billings, where my friend was. But once I came over here, and I guess if my secretary hadn't laid it on me, maybe I would have put it off, That was it. There was just a connection immediately, not so much with Missoula, but the environment. And I still feel that way. Western Montana has a unique feeling in terms of the people that come here. It's a different thing too. So many of the people here, I very seldom get into a negative conversation of any kind, because so many people here gave up something to come live here. They felt the way I did. There was something very special about here, and they know why. So many times we get born into an area, we take it all for granted. But when they make those decisions, to me, it's one of the things I love most about Missoula. I don't care where I go to, a bar or a restaurant or wherever, just hanging around with a bunch of new guys in my life. We don't talk negativity. It's mostly positive stuff. And that's very rare. I've lived in Pittsburgh. I've lived in Kansas City. I've lived in Topeka, lived in Minneapolis, Cleveland, and then New York City, besides my little town in Iowa. So I've had a lot of experience with different communities. This is by far the most positive community I've ever lived in. And then when I do a lot of volunteer work, I meet so many people and there's so many of the same people who just keep giving to this community and giving to this community in so many ways, not just money, but skills, certain kinds of activity that really.
Do you have a favorite coffee shop here in Missoula?
No, I don't. I don't drink much coffee anymore. And I don't hang out at coffee shops.
How about a restaurant?
Yeah, I've got a few of those because I don't cook. And when my wife died,
neither do I.
Okay. And when my wife passed, I had to learn a whole different way of getting food. Now I have my breakfast at home, and I do have my coffee then and cereal. Okay. But then I have like 5-6 restaurants I go to, because each has kind of a different, the Montana Club, Paradise Falls, Paul's Pancake Kitchen, Liquid Planet, and the Mustard Seed. They're all kind of on the same side of town. And, but you know what? I want to tell you something that I've mentioned this to other people too. When I lost my wife, it was very painful, very lonely. But my waiters and waitresses who were with me at these restaurants made life easier for me to deal with this loss. The fun we had, the interaction we would have, they knew what I was going to order every time I was going to go in. I mean, there was a wonderful, loving, to me, people don't talk about that, but in the day and the COVID thing, there were so many people that were really lonely. And I think those waiters and waitresses kind of helps you get through that. I know I've heard guys say that about bartenders, that during that time they had a bar they went to and they loved the guy behind that bar. Anyway, I wanted to mention that. That's the good news about these restaurants.
Yeah.
I really get upset when one of them decides they're not working anymore, or they're moving to another place.
Sure.
Because they become family almost,
What zip code do you live in, Larry?
Pardon?
What zip code do you live in?
01.
Awesome.
Centrally located, right?
Right where my kids went to high school, Hellgate High School.
Nice. Larry, what to you is just the weirdest thing about Missoula?
You know, I guess I can't. I never think of that as weird. I mean, I'm trying to think. There's nothing that comes to me when you ask that particular. I've had such great experiences with the environment and with the people.
Yeah. So let me ask you, what do you love the most about Missoula?
I would say, number one, Missoula itself and my community, the people I interact with in different ways. I've got a couple of old farts groups that I meet with and stuff like. I mean, ideal because I lost a wife. I had to take care of her for almost 2-year period. A lot of men are going through that because we were told we die first. The women always, that's not happening. Women are living the most stressful lives. I learned that I had open heart surgery, and we talked about stress. Stress is by far the leading killer, more than fatty foods and all the other things we hear about. Mm-hmm. Stress is. And now women are living the most stressful lives, not men, because they're now working and trying to take care of home. And so, I have a little group of guys, about 4 guys that we now meet who now they've all lost their wives. But we've worked I tried to get them to talk about it. Don't keep it all inside you and all of that. And so I have those kind of community things I get involved with. And the people I've been involved with, like I say, there's nothing screwball or nothing that's negative for me here in Missoula. And then, as I've said, the environment for me, and I really believe people who will spend time in environment can stay healthier. There's just something about being one with nature that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Larry, is there a particular book you've read that has made a significant impact on your life?
No. The printed word has very little impact. Images and relationships have the biggest impact on my life. I can remember lots of things through the images I remember, mm-hmm. but not the words, not the dates, not all this stuff. And I'm that way with the book. For me, the movie replaced the book. That's where fantasy was for me, but it was, again, visual. And I went to movies constantly. Now the movies don't communicate with me. And so I don't go to movies.
Well, how about that? No. Put you on the spot here. Do you have an all-time favorite movie? A movie that you could just watch over and over?
One of my favorites was John Wayne movies because my dad loved John Wayne movies. And Stagecoach, was a great John Wayne movie. And, that whole series of his stuff, I had the greatest impact on me. Yeah.
Well, back to the horse.
Yes.
So the horse became iconic for you. I could be wrong here. I feel like the most well-known piece of art that you've done here locally in Missoula, they didn't ask for this, but First Security Bank.
Yes.
Their logo, that horse that's on billboards all over this town. How did that come to be? They'd reach out to you? Did you approach them? Did they?
Yes. Bill Boucher was the president in those days, and Bill knew my wife very well too. And so we banked there. I mean, that's how I met Bill. Okay. And as Bill and I got to know each other, and he saw what I was doing as an artist. Bill was going to switch. He was head of one bank. I can't even tell you the name of it before he took over the First Security Bank. And that's when he said, I want a new logo. I want something that says us, not the past. Mm. And so we sat down and talked about what symbol. And then I drew up 3 or 4 horse logos.
Well, you said don't bring up names or dates, but I'm going to do that. Do you remember what year that was? How far back? Because I feel like that horse has just been iconic. It's always been there, but I don't know when
it's not always been there, but I would guess probably around 80.
Okay.
I would guess around then.
Okay.
It might have been a little longer than that. I came here in 78. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it could have been like 84, something in
early
that
80s
category. Yeah.
And your work has just become iconic across Missoula. I mean, it's in the depot, the airport, obviously the gallery downtown, First Security Bank, you drive down Reserve Street, you see your artwork. How did you become who you became in Missoula?
Because of what I said earlier is that I knew when I moved to this community, I would find ways to participate using my art, not for money. That was not my drive. The purpose was to be part of a community and to meet the people, which I had found when, they ask you to do this or do that. I mean, Bill asking me to do that was no different than my buddies when I was a little kid want me to draw airplanes and tanks, stuff like that, after the war. It's the same thing. It's the part of me that it gives me great joy when I can do images for other people. Now, a lot of artists would tell you, well, he's no artist. See, letting other people influence him that much. Every artist is different. Everything that drives us is different. The cowboy and horse, for me, has always been, when you said art for me, that's what it meant to me. And even though I got exposed to the world art, and I'm glad I did, for me, it was always the cowboy and the horse that was my focus. The mountains were also a symbol that I love because we used to go through Colorado to visit my grandparents every year. And that was where that started. Okay.
Do you have a particular piece that you treasure the most? You take a lot of pride in? Like,
I'm always on to the new piece. I'm not ever thinking much about the past.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll look at a piece, but I don't now. As I've gotten older, I have more of my pieces in my house. But there was a time when I never put a single one of my pieces. I put other artists' work in my home because I accepted it.
Yeah.
If my art was there, because you're always growing and learning, I'd always picket that art at the house and ruin some art because of, trying to make it a different time,
Sure.
I burned a lot of art. That's another thing I did early in my life because so many of my artist friends were saying all of that art that was crap ended up coming back in their life because they had to sell it. And then people got rid of it. And all of a sudden, boom, it's back in their life. And that was before the computer age. Now that stuff comes back on the computer all the time. But I saw that because of my early experiences. So I got rid of a lot of my crap before anybody could get it into the market.
So different question, but similar. Do you have, what piece has become your most popular, most recognized? What's the print that just you can't keep in stock?
Well, we don't have that.
Okay.
It doesn't exist. Like you just said, First Security is a symbol that people are most aware of. A lot of people don't realize that I also did the logo for the ballet company that's on the side of their building.
Sure.
Because I worked with them. I did stage designs and different things for them in the beginning when she started the process. And so much it's like my work at the Carousel. There's just so many organizations in this town where I could use my art to help them out. I like the posters that are at St. Pat's was a fundraiser for the Heart Institute because I had a heart problem, and so I got to know them, and they were trying to raise money, and so they asked me if I'd do some posters for them. Absolutely. And again, it's no different part of me than somebody saying, would you do that tank for me? Whatever. It's the same part of me. See, now again, some artists, it would never be. I had the biggest challenge that I ever had in my life where I almost would have quit doing cowboys and horses was when I was at Pratt in my junior year. A teacher that I had a lot of respect for took me over in a corner and said, Larry, you've got to change your subject. Your subject is not universal enough. If I was ever going to stop with the cowboy and horse, that would have been the time. Because for some artists, that would have been the end. They would have, in order to have success or whatever, they would have gone that other direction, And so that's the closest I ever came to not doing cowboys and horses.
Yeah. Larry, just a couple quick questions for you before we wrap up. Thanks again for being here and sharing your story.
It's a joy always to share.
85 years of just incredible history here. Here now, what's the tail end of your career looking like? Are you still painting? Are you still in the studio? What's life look like for you today?
I'm not painting very much at all. I'm still making lots of pictures for friends and doing different projects.
Mhm.
But the marketplace for me now doesn't have the same. I just have one gallery instead of 5. Irene had me in 5 and 6 galleries all the time. She had me in over 30 galleries all over our career together. When people didn't sell, she took it out, put it somewhere else, and everywhere from Canada down to Texas.
Wow.
And I don't have that now, and I'm not going to travel. Those days are over, and I've traveled a lot. No, so that is another reason why I'm not painting much now, and it's too bad because Lynn, my gallery owner here, is running short of product.
Yeah,
and I feel bad about it, and I'm hoping that there'll be something that'll happen where all of a sudden, I got an idea. Let's go paint a few things. Right now I'm starting a program with the children's theater. That big wall that's there when you walk into that wall of all the people that have given different ways. Well, they want to change that into something more colorful. So they contacted me because, I have that one area that's Missoula.
Yep.
And so they want more of that kind of color on that wall. So I'm right now in the middle of designing a concept where we can put those names in there, but in a colorful kind of symbol instead of what those were very institutional kinds of, and you couldn't see the names. I mean, It was impossible. And so people who you want to recognize, and it's real in this town, and this is what they've said to me, we want the family and friends to be able to see that name, that this man or this company, donated time and effort. So anyway, that's what's going on. I'm always going to make pictures.
I love that you're still 85, still going, still working.
Well, and I think that if you live your passion, you stay younger because the kid in you has a lot more to say day to day than if you let that adult in you take you over. And that's why I said to you earlier about the very crucial time when I was almost going to quit my art and the kid took over. Mm-hmm. And from that point on now, that's where I won't do anything without playing with color. Sorry.
Bold and colorful.
There you go.
Well, Larry, thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio, and thanks for making Missoula your home. We really appreciate what you've given out to the world and that kid in you.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
And I appreciate it too. And I love this community. Love this community.